Africans had to solve their problems by themselves. And the words that were spoken over 50 years ago are as relevant today as when they were spoken. The misguided belief by Africans that somebody will come to the continent of Africa and rescue the continent of Africa can only be what it is, misguided belief. It is Nigeria's Chinua Achebe who described it as the cargo cult mentality, the belief by people that without any effort on their part, somebody who has received divine inspiration and guidance will come and like Moses parted the Red Sea will say, hunger disappear and hunger disappears, poverty disappear and poverty disappears. Nothing is going to happen like that. We've got to lift up ourselves by our bootstraps, but we must remember that even our boots were taken, so that when we are told to lift ourselves by our bootstraps, we don't even have boots. Sometimes we are told that we've got to tighten our belt, but we don't even have belts. So the first thing is that we must recognize what is it that we have. Nobody can deny that Africa is a rich continent. Nobody can deny. Nobody, there is diamond, there is gold, there is all these things, but gold and mind is useless. Diamond and mind and unrefined is useless. Flowers ungathered are useless. We must apply some effort and some labor. You know, international relations, and I'm not an expert in it, sometimes teaches me many lessons. When I look at the structure of the world power, I look at the organization, or rather the United Nations organization founded in San Francisco in 1945, and they created what is called the permanent members of the United Nations. No African country was independent save Ethiopia and Liberia at the time of the founding of the United Nations organization in San Francisco. And then I look at the structure of the United Nations today. Africa has the largest majority of countries. African countries can go to New York and they can vote all they want. And once they are voted, if the French don't like it, one French vote neutralizes all the votes by something that they describe as a veto vote. Whenever I look at that situation, it tells us that we are not at the dinner table. Or if we are not diners. We are waiters at the very best. Or we are food to be consumed at the very worst. That is the closest we get to the dinner table. And that is not the only thing that I look at. When the G7 meet, the G7, these are the nations that are richest on earth. When they meet occasionally, when there is divine providence, they invite one or two African leaders. And after they have taken the photograph at the opening, the African leaders are then asked, you may now go. We are now going to discuss real things. And real things are discussed in the absence of the continent of Africa with over 1.5 billion human beings. That is before a proper census has been taken. That is the Africa that we are talking about. Then you have a meeting of the G20, that is, they are now trying to incorporate a few. Even then, Africa is very poorly represented. There is an African saying that you cannot be shaved in your absence. Africa is always absent, and yet it is asking to have a haircut. How can you have a haircut in your absence? I hold the view that we have the intellectual wherewithal, that we have the capacity, but we must demonstrate the capacity. It is not at conferences such as this that we make pronouncement. Our words must be wedded with our deeds. If our words are not wedded with our deeds, then we can pontificate all we want. We can lecture all we want. We can hold workshops and symposia and festivals all we want. But I'm telling you, for those of you who are Christian, Christ will come and will still be pontificating and holding symposia to his surprise and disgust. So we were here today posing the question, what solution must we have to African problems? We can't. And whenever Africans have tried to do things and to have solutions to their problems, they have succeeded. Look at the entire process of decolonization. It was animated by Africans wherever they were. Whether it was Marcus Garvey in Jamaica, or George Padmore, or W.E.B. Du Bois, or other Africans who are in the diaspora, the connectivity was amazing, and there were no jets. The modes of travel were difficult, but there is something that told them that when we unite, and we unite with a purpose, then we can realize what we want and desire. And we decolonize Africa. In South Africa, when the apartheid regime refused to leave, it was not the effort of Europe and America that brought the camels back. No, it was not. It was the young men and women in Sharpeville in 1960 and the young boys in Soweto in 1976 that brought the camels back. Whenever Africa has wanted to achieve something and wanted it bad enough, it has always achieved. And we can see that whenever Africa has focused on certain things, it has realized those things. Those of you who are students of African history and African geography and African politics will see that when our countries regained independence, the very first few years, Africa was realizing immeasurable growth, whether it was in the area of infrastructure or in the area of education. Africans were achieving great things. We were disrupted, but it is a demonstration that we can do things for ourselves. That does not mean that we will not be helped by our friends of goodwill. Our friends of goodwill will if they want to, but history demonstrates and has demonstrated times without number. Carter G. Woodson once said in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, that the relationship between peoples must not be the relationship between a horse and the rider. The tragedy of Africa today is that when we relate with other civilizations, we relate as if we are the horse to be beaten along and others are the riders to guide us where they will. We must reverse the relationship and participate in a more meaningful way. And the world, as I understand it, is still very right. Charles Darwin, if I'm right in remembering who the one who said this, but the world is still about survival of the fittest and the dying of the least suitable. Don't be deluded. Everybody and every civilization does what is in their best interest. And I do not begrudge civilizations when they do what is in their best interest. If Africans choose to do what is not in our best interest, woe betide you. Woe betide you. We must be able to identify what is best for us. And today, when I look at Africa, what do I see without being fatalistic? I see a continent that is capable of rising, a continent that is in fact rising. But let me tell you also, Africa must tell her story. I do not know, those who do not know Africa, even when they are citing proverbs, they say this is an African proverb. No. Africa has 3,000 plus nations. But amongst the many African nations, there is a saying that unless the lands have their historians, it is the exploit of the hunter that will be written and talked about, and not the bravery of the lion. Africa must tell her story. You know, you are a typical African who has gone to school and who is exposed, that does not sleep for 2 nights when they are interviewed by CNN. And they are quick to say, I was interviewed by the CNN. They don't tell you that CNN will repeat one item of news for 30 times in 24 hours. That they don't tell you. When they are German speakers, they'll say, I've been interviewed by Radio Deutsche Welle. And that is a point of bragging. When they have been interviewed by the French television, they are proud about it. But those media houses were created, among other things, to tell the story of Germany from a German perspective. Yes. CNN to tell the story of America from an American perspective. Al Jazeera to tell the story of the Arabs from an Arab perspective. Where is the media house that tells the story of Africa from an African perspective?
There we are.
Today we do so. And SABC from South Africa tries. I know.
SCBC.
And SBC, I'm told tries, but you are not trying hard enough. Because if you are trying hard enough, I would have known about you. But now that I know about you, I'll talk about you. My point remains valid that Africa must tell her story. Otherwise, the story that you hear about Africa are how African children are dying. And they are dying in certain areas. Yes. But there are good things they never tell you. That the Ethiopians have recently built an electric train from Djibouti. They never tell you that. They'll never tell you that Kenya has one of the largest wind farms in the world. They'll never tell you that. They'll never tell you that Morocco has one of the largest solar farms in the world. But the Moroccans must make a decision whether they are Africans when it is convenient, because sometimes when it is convenient, they are multi-class. So the Moroccans who are here decide, are you Africans or you are not? Because you cannot be present in 2 different places at the same time. So we want clarity from Morocco. We can see clarity from Algeria. We can see clarity from Egypt. I'm talking about the Maghreb. We want clarity so that when we are talking about Africa, we are clear who is with us and who is not with us. But the point that I'm making is that there is an Africa that is doing well. Go to Ghana now. You may have faults and no system is perfect, but you are beginning to see things. Yes. Go to South Africa, they may have their problems, but one can see things. Go to Tanzania, you are seeing things. Even in terms of dispute resolution, for nearly 20 years, the Ethiopians and the Eritreans were not seeing eye to eye. It did not need a mediator from Europe or the United States of America. It took one Prime Minister Abiy of Ethiopia, and he came, and within 6 months, there is peace that is restored. Only yesterday, we saw the successful signing of the peace between Frelimo and Renamo in Mozambique. In other words, we are beginning to see progress, Central African Republic, but there are still a few areas that must make us unhappy as Africa. And once again, I hold the view that is incumbent upon us to find solutions. Sudan is restless. You know, we thought in the year 2011 that when Sudan was divided and we had the South and the Sudan separated, it would solve the problem. Several years down the line, there is a problem in Sudan and in South Sudan. Yet I believe that if we sit and our leaders or so-called political leaders sit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and determined to solve those problems, we can find a solution. We can find a solution. And it gladdens my heart that my good brother from Ethiopia is here. It is not lost on me that your Prime Minister has been shuttling from Khartoum to Juba to Addis Ababa in an attempt to create peace. I hope that he will be a successful midwife. And he needs to be supported in that regard. I'm mentioning these problems in order for us to recognize and agree with my brother, Dr. Folifa, that if the foot is not comfortable, it creates discomfort to the entire body. Yes. And that is what brings me to to Ambazonia. And you Ambazonians must also have clarity. Yes. Sometimes you are Southern Cameroons. Sometimes you are Ambazonians. Choose you now how you want to be referred to. Ambazonia. And if it is Ambazonian, some say that there is something in a name. How many of you had the privilege and honor of watching Alex Haley's Roots? And if you did, you remember one of the very first tasks of breaking down Kunta Kinte was to beat him down so that he becomes Toby. He accepted the name Toby, but the spirit of Kunta Kinte never died. So from today henceforth, we will only refer to Ambazonia with the appendage Southern Cameroon for historical reason. But going forward, we are talking about a segment of what is now known as the Cameroon, but which is correctly Ambazonia. Yeah. And it brings me to the question. I have also been asked on different occasions, how can you talk of Pan-Africanism and yet even dare suggest that a people within the African continent cannot seek self-determination? And in my view, they are not mutually exclusive. You know, many of you here are parents, and you love your children, and you love them so much, and you do not want to be separated from them. But as they grow old, when they attain the age of 18, particularly here in Europe, you begin to show them signs that the time has come, that if our love is to remain strengthened, you must look for your own apartment. It is not an expansion, and if they remain in the residence, they must take up some of the bills, pay this electricity or pay for water. Sometimes relationships are strengthened when people are separated and they do certain things by themselves. What I hear the people, the oppressed people of Ambazonia say is that we were deluded in 1960s, and they were. Those of you who are students of history will appreciate this. They were told that these would be the terms of engagement. Those terms of engagement have been honored in breach. And what we want to hear, therefore, is that the people of Ambazonia are helped by their African brethren to, number one, stop the creeping genocide that is taking place in that part of the world. It saddens me that the African Union has never called an emergency meeting to discuss the issue of Ambazonia. It saddens one. But that, once again, is a weakness. It is our weakness because for some reason, sometimes we too believe that Europe will solve our problems. Europe has no business solving our problems. Europe has many problems which they had better be solving. And this assumption that Europe is going to come and solve our problems is completely misguided. In fact, one day, we need an African meeting, an African Union meeting with only 3 agenda items. Agenda item number 1, what is wrong with us? That is the only item that we discuss for 1 week. What is wrong with us? That not because for anything, because we are punching below our weight. Not that we are not doing certain things, but Africa punches below our weight. Politically, economically, and otherwise, we are punching below our weight. Yesterday, I saw an interview of a young African in Libya. And this young African was a woman who had been raped. She had been enslaved. And yet she was saying that if she has an opportunity, she'll still want to cross the Mediterranean to come to Europe. Why would I want to come to Europe? It must be that the conditions at home are so bad. And yet somehow, our leaders see these and they are moved and untouched. They must have hearts of stone. As I speak to you now, there are over 60,000 Africans in slavery or virtual slavery in Libya. In slavery, modern day slavery. And we don't speak about it. We don't talk about the conditions that made them leave their countries, because in order to leave West Africa, you've got to grapple with the Sahara. And after the Sahara, you've got to grapple with the Mediterranean Sea. And after you've crossed the Mediterranean Sea, the Italian Prime Minister does not want you to get into Europe. And even other Europeans are accepting you grudgingly. And except for very few, many of them who get into Europe will go into menial jobs. Of course, there is a cadre of many Africans who have come to Europe and are well trained and are doing great things as doctors and engineers. They are building a continent which is already built. It is Africa that needs them, but Africa must create an environment. 2 years ago, I met a young lady doctor from Zimbabwe in Austria. And I was pontificating, pretending to know it all and telling her, why don't you go home to Zimbabwe? And this was a response to me. When I left Zimbabwe, my salary was the equivalent of $5 a month. My children have got to go to school. If you are me, would you go back? I told her I would not. Because the first instinct of a human being is self-preservation. Yeah. So what must happen is that there must be an environment that is created by our countries, and we must participate in the creation of that environment. Don't be deluded that somebody will create it. And that is why it gladdens me to see and to be present in a festival such as this. Because this kind of festival is celebrating the potential of Africans, what we can do. But we can do better. But remember, my thesis is that we still continue to punch below our weight. My good friend Dr. Folefak said that the day he acquired the almighty American passport, he moves without let and hindrance. Those of you who have the American passport, you can go to virtually any country. Because there is no fear that you will remain in those countries. Those of you who have the European passport, the German passport, you can go to any country. But you take one of these poor African countries and their passports and the number of questions that you are asked when you arrive at a border post, including who your grandfather was, they ask. We are continuing to punch below our weight politically. The day we are powerful, the world will respect us. Today, I come to the airport here in Stuttgart, and the signage is also in Chinese. The Chinese have arrived, and the world cannot ignore them. You go to any country today, good dining means Chinese food, among other things. Good dining means that you must eat with chopsticks. That is, when you arrive in the world and you arrive with a bang, and politically you are strong and economically you are strong, even your enemies begin to refer to you in flattering ways. Africa must attain, and the Chinese did it by stealth and by working hard and by identifying what they want, and they have worked at it. You cannot ignore them. We too can find ourselves in such a situation. But we must work at it. We can work at it. And that is why when I look at Africa today and I see the West Africans are beginning to grapple with a currency called the eco, it gladdens my heart. Why? Because those are baby steps toward the realization of a larger goal. Because one day we may have a currency called the Afro, and then as we move to the Afro, it will become hard currency. Because none of your currencies are hard, they are useless. Once you leave your border, our currencies are useless. People wonder whether they are things that children use in playing Monopoly. But the day we have Afro, which is a continental currency that is backed by goods and services. Because the African economy GDP last year was just about 3 trillion. 1.3 billion of us. The total goods that we produced last year is less than Germany. The German GDP is possibly anything between $4 and $5 trillion. How can it be? Little Germany. What is it that they are doing that we are not doing? There must be something, and you who are here, who are engineers, copy what they are doing and bring it back home. That is what we can learn from them. They have some of the best schools in engineering. Learn and bring it home. And you don't have to be physically home to bring it home. Perhaps you who are here are too old to be useful. But your children and children's children must be tutored in such a manner that they normally look to what permit me to call their spiritual and political true north. They must remember Mother Africa, because it is only then that we will then meet at a conference of civilization. It can be done, but it's not going to be easy. It is not for the faint-hearted. Even when we say these things, it is not that we are naive. We are not saying that they are going to happen tomorrow. We are not saying that will happen, that they will not be impeded. They will be. Africa can solve her problems. You know, these boundaries that we have, they never worry me, because they can be administrative. All these boundaries we have in Africa with 54, 55 countries, depending on which country you are not counting. Because the Moroccans don't want us to count Saharawi. And Cameroon does not want us to count Ambazonia, but I am counting it. And when we count it, it is not anti-African. These are just boundaries. And those of you who live in the European Union know how easy it is to move across Europe. Because the boundaries are there for administration and other things, but the ease with which you now transact, if you ask the Greeks what Europe has done to them, I'm sure that if they are sincere, they'll tell you they have done great things to us. If you ask the Portuguese what Europe has done to them, they'll tell you it is a great thing. If you ask the Spaniard, forget this atavistic jingoism, which they may relapse into occasionally in order to say we are this. That is what we are saying African Union will do to the rest of us. So you can be Amazonian all you want, you can be Tanzanian all you want, you can be Senegalese all you want, but we are talking about Africa. And I look forward to the day when we also have a lingua franca.
Oh, pity.
And it appears to me that Kiswahili is beginning to acquire that lingua franca character. It can be done. Because right now, Kiswahili has no less than 300 speakers. So I look forward to the day when we go into an international conference and we have interpreters simultaneous and we are waxing eloquent in Kiswahili. As it is now, whatever we Africans are saying, the English can hear all of it. We cannot backbite them. We must have a language in which we can backbite them and in which we can say certain things that they do not understand, citing proverbs and idioms that they cannot understand.
Pigeon.
Pigeon, you know, as I conclude, whenever I travel across Africa, and now I must say this because I'm in Germany, and they are a very proud civilization, the Germans. Even when there are no more than 2,000 of them in a country, they'll always have a German school. So that their children can be translocated from their motherland, but they still retain their Germanness. It is by being good Germans that the Germans become good Europeans. It is not, you must be a good Tanzanian to become a good African.
Very good.
You must be a good Amazonian to become a good African.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think that is why when you go to any of these countries, you find something, all of them, the British Cultural Center. Yes. In Nigeria, British Cultural Center.
Yeah.
The Goethe Institute in Nairobi, Kenya. The French Cultural Center. But I come here.
There is not
a single African country with a cultural center except this festival, which is trying to mimic a cultural center. I'm saying that as civilizations such as Ethiopia could be pioneering, and to this end you must be celebrated. You travel around the world and you see an Ethiopian restaurant. Yes. And you know that there is injera that is being eaten there. And you know that there is coffee. So in a nutshell, I can talk until the cows come home. But there is no wisdom because there are no cows and there is no home here. So I could talk forever. But what I believe is that we Africans have the solution to the problems that we have. But let us also not beat ourselves too much. As I travel across Africa, and I travel across Africa enough to know that there are good things happening in Africa. Right. Yes. I go to Kigali, Rwanda, after the genocide in 1994, and I see certain things that I say that there are good things happening in Africa. Right. There may be problems here and there, and there is no shortage of people who will criticize, but critics sometimes are useful only to the extent that they criticize, but if they are not constructive. Good things happening in Kigali, Rwanda. I go down to Namibia and they may talk about unemployment to Botswana, but there are good things happening. You come to my own country, Kenya, there are good things happening, although we may grumble here and there. You go to Tanzania, there are good things happening. In other words, there I can begin to see baby steps. It is not going to be perfect. Even in heaven, there was no perfection.
That's why Satan left.
Now, if the divinity itself did not know perfection and certain angels rebelled, who are we not to have certain incapacities? And that is why, therefore, we need our friends of goodwill. So that when I see us collaborating and I see people from different civilizations, I can only appreciate that what is happening today here is a cross-fertilization and a cross-pollination of ideas. And when they are cross-pollinated and cross-fertilized, the product can only be good. Africa must be great, and Africa can be great, and Africa will be great. God bless you.